The absolute peak of the Fire Mike Sullivan movement, if you want to call it that, had to have been after the 6-1 loss to the new Utah team. That was just 9 days ago. Good morning to you. Good Monday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Penguins. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into football and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Pirates in the same place that you found this. The Penguins have now won 3 in a row since that Utah loss. In fact, that was a longer stretch. Of course, the Penguins having gone 1-4-2 in 7 games, culminating in the worst way with that Utah loss. Since then, they've beaten the Canucks 5-4. They've beaten the Bruins 2-1 up in Boston. And then they really beat up on the Flames a couple nights ago at PPG Paints Arena 6-2. And there's not a whole lot bad to be said about any of it. Yeah, they've still given up some ugly chances. Not so much in the Boston game, but in the other two. Lots of odd man breaks, lots of, stuff that they usually do. And of course, in the Vancouver game, they had do we really want to talk about almost blowing a 5-1 lead? No, okay. But they've played better, and they're carrying themselves with their chins a little bit higher. They're feeling more confident in what it is that they're supposed to be doing and that they can do it, in large part because they've had some individual successes. That's something that Brian Rust and I were talking about a few days ago, how you need to have that validation. And it doesn't often work in the reverse, where you say, well, we're just going to go and get this done and then just magically make it happen. There has to be a, hey, look, this thing that we did, it worked. And when we did it again, it worked again. This was what Sullivan had to say about the team's really encouraging past handful of days. This was after the game against Calgary.
I don't think it's by coincidence we were able to string 3 in a row here. I think that the style of game that we're playing is conducive to winning. It gives us a chance, and I give the players a lot of credit. I think they're buying in. I think they're playing on their toes. I think they're starting to believe, and for me that's a good feeling. I'm happy for them. We've gone through a tough stretch. To win a few in a row is a great feeling. I'm happy for the players.
Now listen, the last thing I'm going to do is make more of these 3 games than I would have with the previous 3 games, or for that matter, the 3 games before those, because you're ultimately just whatever your body of work says you are, and the body of work says that this is a bad hockey team. I have a hard time buying that it's a bad hockey team, considering that it still has a point a game Sidney Crosby and several other top talents. So whenever you have even a reasonable supporting cast with a group like this, you're at least going to be in the conversation for contention, for being a decent team. I think that's a fair assessment to make. Now, where does it go from here? Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, the Stanley Cup champs are in here tomorrow night. I mean, look, if they take care of business against the Panthers, God love them. They can go on some kind of epic roll here. But what they need to do more than anything else, I believe, isn't even necessarily get the results. I believe they just need to keep getting better as a hockey team. I thought there were periods over these past 3 games where you could say, all right, I mean, that looks like something. Mostly in the Boston game, because that was the one really out of the 3 where you saw them succeeding at things that are outside their normal comfort zone. And you know what I mean when I'm saying that, because for them to get a big old lead against the Canucks All right. I mean, they have some guys who are capable of that. For them to get the big old lead against the Flames, same thing. But for them to just basically cling by their fingernails to the edge of the cliff all night long in a road arena, that was something different. That was something that was worth marking down. If there is going to be a pivoting point or a transformation to be had here, I see that one game out of these three as the one that where you say, all right, maybe they finally understand that the only way they're going to get out of this, to borrow Sullivan's line, something he said in a response to me 3 or 4 weeks ago, we're going to have to defend our way out of this. We're not going to score our way out. We're going to have to defend our way out of this hole that we're in. And, maybe this was the start. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it doesn't matter much at all. Maybe it's all just about asset management and this is just a delay. I don't know. If you were thinking that I might have something grand to offer about 3 straight wins, I don't. I'm a lot like Sullivan. I'm happy for the individuals who are faring well, who are feeling better about themselves. It would be wonderful to think that that'd lead to something larger in an uplifting context, but wow, still swimming against the tide. When we come back, J1Q. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online, your number one source for all your summer sports needs this season, from Major League Baseball, golf, NHL, NBA playoffs. Get the latest odds and lines, including all team matchups, player props, odds on just about everything that's out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. Today's J1Q comes from Derek McEachern, who says, DK, if the environment that Kyle Dubas is trying to create is about giving struggling prospects a chance, isn't the opposite also true? Meaning, you can embrace your golden opportunity kid, but the kid also knows that you can be shipped out just as quickly. A guy like Philip Tomasino is just as mentally fragile from his experience in Nashville as the rest of the Penguins. He might be excited for his chance, but put him in a room of guys who are as demoralized and unable to sustain any kind of momentum. And how likely is this kid to turn his career around, especially given Sullivan's impatience with kids? Has Sullivan really shown that he can nurture and develop these kinds of players? Now, I loved this cue, Derek, and I loved it so much that I saved it through the extra long weekend that we had here through Thanksgiving to utilize it, because you wrote this before Tomasino had played a game with the Penguins. Since then, of course, Tomasino has played 3 games. He's been highly visible in all 3 of those. And of course, in the past 2, he has a goal each. He's also smiling. He's being patted on the back by his coaches and teammates, and everybody's telling him how awesome he is and all that other happy stuff. And that is how you get on Sullivan's good side as a young player. What he lacks is not an understanding of young players or what it takes to make them be this or that. What he lacks is patience. This is a guy who, from the moment he was employed by the Penguins back in 2016, had one mandate, and that was to win the Stanley Cup, like right away, which he did, like right away, not once, but twice. One of the common points that gets brought up in that context, in that time frame, was, well, why did Sullivan not have a hard time utilizing young players back then, like when Brian Rust came up right away, Tom Kuhnhackl, Scott Wilson, Connor Sherry, and then the following year, Jake Gensel came up. Matt Murray, of course, was young. Why is it that he went with those guys when, it's because he was Wilkes-Barre's coach? Well, no, he was Wilkes-Barre's coach for like a month and a half. That wasn't it at all. It wasn't that he developed some sort of intensive, trusting relationship with these guys in the span of a month and a half. What it was in every one of these cases was that the players delivered almost immediately. They weren't completed products. In particular, Rust had a long way to go to become the player that he is today, but they made an impact, and they did that without needing 10, 12, 14, 20 games to get acclimated. Whereas, and I've made the same case about Sullivan regarding specific players over the years, I'll also point out when those players aren't helping themselves. Now, you guys might know how strongly I feel about Valtteri Puustinen and what he can do in hockey when he decides he's okay with shooting the hockey puck. But he doesn't do that. And they tell him to do that. And then his teammates tell him to do that. And he still doesn't do that. The Penguins have been patient beyond any reasonable reckoning with Sam Poulin, attempting even to instill some identity into his game. Think about that. Think about that phrase, instilling some identity. And yet he just goes out there, he participates in the shift, and he goes back to the bench, and he didn't have any impact on that shift. Not at the NHL level, but you'll send him down to the minors, and he'll just be a fish right back in water. So Tomasino's here now. Tomasino's having, it's been a couple of games, but he's having an impact. He was put in a position of immediate responsibility by being added to Evgeny Malkin's line. When that line didn't have a great start in its first game, the one against Vancouver, it wasn't Tomasino who was removed. It was Michael Bunting who was removed, Drew O'Connor who was moved up. And those three together have been terrific ever since. So yeah, I think there's truth to Sullivan trusting the older guys over the younger guys. I am beyond still mortified that Jesse Puljujarvi ever gets scratched, but he was scratched all weekend. He was scratched in favor of Matt Nieto, and that's awful. That's awful. That's directionless crap. So I'm hardly suggesting that he's perfect in this regard. I just don't think it's as much of a thing as most people make it out to be. I appreciate the question. I appreciate the intention behind it. It's really, really good stuff. I appreciate everybody checking out Daily Shot of Penguins. We'll be back with another one of these tomorrow.